Verhei, Football Outsiders assistant editor. Joining me, as always, Football Outsiders editor-in-chief Aaron Schatz, Football Outsiders contributing writer Bryan Knowles. We're here to discuss the stats and trivia and numerical tidbits from Week 10 of the NFL, but I suspect this will turn into 60 minutes of Bills-Vikings discussion. We will see how it goes. But before we get into that, I do want to mention real quick that we are big fans of our friends at Underdog Fantasy. You can play on Underdog Fantasy with us and double your first deposit up to $100 with promo code OUTSIDERS. Are your season-long fantasy teams floundering? You can play Underdog's Battle Royale, a fast 6-round weekly fantasy football draft with easier chances to win than traditional daily fantasy sports sites. You could even win $50,000 if you grab first place. Or try their pick'em games where you can easily pick players' chances to go higher or lower than their projected stat lines, even in states where traditional prop betting currently is not available. Underdog is the fastest growing fantasy site around. Join the fun over at underdogfantasy.com or download Underdog in the App Store. And remember to use promo code OUTSIDERS now to double your first deposit up to $100. So thank you again to our friends at Underdog. And let's just jump right in, guys. Was Minnesota Vikings at the Buffalo Bills the game of the year?
Probably. Yeah, it's gonna be hard to top too. That was the second half was just a pile of the least likely events in the history of the world, just one on top of another. Makes for an incredibly exciting, if not particularly predictive, football game.
There were definitely some people who were like, that was the best regular season game of all time. So I went and made a list of great regular season games. And there have been a lot of really great regular season games.
Turns out football's exciting.
I would say that was definitely one of the 16 best regular season games of all time. If I were to make like a little tournament of regular season games, I think that would definitely come out in the top 16.
It was incredible. It's why we watch football. It was an incredibly fun game to watch.
Yes, unless you're a Bills fan, in which case it was not incredibly fun to watch. It was incredibly frustrating to watch.
Well, that's why we watch football sometimes, is to get incredibly frustrated when our team isn't doing the right things.
Yes.
And yet the Bills mostly were doing the right things until the very end.
Well, right. That's the thing about this game is, DVOA loved the Bills in this game. The Bills gained more yards per play. They had a much higher success rate, 55% to 41%. And there were 4 fumbles, and the Vikings recovered all of them, including, one of the most improbable plays, which is fumbling a quarterback center exchange on the 1-yard line, which is something the Vikings had nothing to do with.
It was hilarious in the Football Outsiders Discord chat. After the big 4-down stop, the Bills fans are celebrating. It's game over, and one voice said, "Well, it's not over. They're on the inch-yard line. They could get a safety." And they're like, "What? The Bills are going to screw up a quarterback sneak with everyone pushing behind him? Josh Allen is going to screw up the quarterback sneak? No way!" Immediately, everything happens.
Right, and then I posted on Twitter. I said, "There's 40 seconds left. This is not over." And people were like, no the Vikings won. And then the Bills came back, and then the Vikings in overtime, and then the Bills, and then he threw an interception, a terrible interception, when they were in field goal range and could have easily tied the game. This was wild.
Yeah. You mentioned how frustrating this was for Bills fans, Aaron. Why don't you talk a little bit about the post-game win expectancy, which is high for Buffalo?
So, based on the stat splits of this game, we would expect the Bills, a team with the stats that the Bills put up, to have won the game 98.6% of the time. That makes this the third most surprising wrong team wins game since 2010, which is as far back as I've run PGWE numbers. It's actually only the second most surprising of this season, behind the Ravens and Dolphins in week 2. But when a team outgains the other team by 0.7 of a yard per play and has a much higher success rate, and each team fumbles the same number of times and throws the same number of interceptions and runs the same number of plays, you would expect the team that was better to win 98% of the time. This was crazy.
Yes, you have here. This is the third most surprising result since 2010. Second most surprising result this season, behind another crazy game that's going to end up having major playoff ramifications when the Dolphins beat the Ravens earlier this year. And these are the two games that may end up deciding number one seed in the AFC, because as of right now, it's the Dolphins on top of that AFC East with the Bills in a wild card slot.
Yeah, and I believe the Chiefs currently have the number one seed.
They
Excuse
do.
me.
That is correct. They're
I-
gaming
I-
on
And the
everyone.
Dolphins would be the number two
Two,
seed if the season
Right.
ended today.
I stand corrected, but the divisional standings.
Because I'm excited about that Dolphins-Patriots rematch.
So
Here's again, I don't think the Patriots. We'll talk about the AFC East maybe, but I don't think the Patriots are going to the playoffs actually. But the Dolphins are.
the Dolphins are. I think we all agree on that. There's, we talked about how many crazy things happened in this game. Brian, there's a list here of like a half dozen items that only happened in this game. They would never happen anywhere else. Somehow they all happened at the same time.
Yeah, I started putting a table together of just all the unlikely things that happened for the Vikings to win here. We mentioned already the Vikings covered all 4 of the fumbles that happened. That's unusual, but that happens occasionally. Fumble happens, but since 1991, only 2 teams have won a game after turning the ball over on downs on a goal-to-go situation in the last 2 minutes. When you that's supposed to be your last gasp play, and that the team would come back to win after turning the ball over. Incredibly rare. Only happened twice since 1991 to the Vikings this week and the Buccaneers last week when they came back against the Rams. So we have been seeing some historically unlikely finishes recently. Eric Kendricks, who covered that fumble on that bad snap, it is the first go-ahead non-offensive touchdown by a trailing team in the last minute of the fourth quarter since 1986 when there was a punt block returned by, I believe it was the Colts. So that doesn't happen. There's only been 2 times in the last 10 years that a player has lost a fumble on their own 1-yard line, and both times it was Josh Allen. And also, Justin Jefferson's very good. I mean, that's not a stat, but I believe that's true. That fourth down catch, the catch.
Oh my God.
That's. I mean, if you take a still shot of that reception and ask someone to tell you how that play ended, like no one would say, "Oh, well, Jefferson caught that." They might say, "Oh, that was a great interception," or "It was a great pass breakup." No one would have predicted that somehow Jefferson was going to come down with that play.
Yeah,
No, he's incredible.
A couple of things here. First of all, you claim Justin Jefferson is very good is not a stat. I'm not sure I agree. I think we can say statistically it's true. Justin Jefferson is very good. That is not an opinion. I think that's a factual statement. So I had a kind of a weird weekend, and I was getting caught up, and I wasn't paying a ton of attention to this game because for one reason I knew everyone else was. I was trying to get to watch something else, so I wasn't just echoing what everyone else was saying. So I knew the Bills had a lead and the Vikings were rallying on all this. I knew they had converted a long fourth down play, but I didn't actually see this catch until hours later. And you mentioned the still shot. It's out there. Someone shared this on Twitter, and the defensive back has the football in his hands, but there's Jefferson's hand is between his face mask and the football. And with one hand, Jefferson's able to pry it out of the way and secure it and go to the ground and maintain possession. It's a superhuman freak athlete. I don't know what to tell you. There's no defense against that. There's no X and O's against that. There's no scheme against that. It's just you got beat by a mutant, and it happens.
Yeah, we talked about whether or not this game was the best regular season game and so on and so forth. That catch is going down in the pantheon of great catches. I mean, it's going to be a rung below, like, I don't know, the helmet catch or something just because it's a regular season game in November. But that's right up there with, like, Odell Beckham's one-handed grab. That's going up there with any of the great catches you can think of in NFL history. Just amazing. And while it didn't technically do the score, it did leave them getting down to the 1-inch line, which led to the score on the other side. So,
yeah,
exceptional.
Yeah,
that was amazing.
Jefferson now has 20 games with 100 or more receiving yards, which is the most for any player in NFL history in their first 3 seasons. He broke a tie with, I believe it was Randy Moss. So Justin Jefferson, okay, statistically, very good. Well, we'll call it a stat.
Yeah, I'm a happy Justin Jefferson on my fantasy team guy. Let me tell you, it's been very valuable.
I bet it has. I bet it has. Now, Aaron, you mentioned that DVOA liked the Bills better in this in this game, even though they lost. Talk to me a little bit more about these splits and what they did better than the Vikings.
Yeah, I mean, they were, better on offense, better on defense. That, usually is the way it is when you have a big split like this. But the Bills had a really big first half, second half split. They had 60% offensive DVOA in the first half and minus 26% in the second half. So even though the Vikings got a little better on offense in the second half, mostly this was an issue where the Bills' offense just had major problems in the second half of this game. And it is the third straight game where the Bills have had negative offensive DVOA in the second half of the game. And they have been outscored 43-12 after halftime in their last 3 games.
Yeah, we'll get into this here about the Bills and their struggles lately, or struggles in the second half of games, and a lot of it just comes down to Josh Allen having a lot of problems making some really, really bad turnovers. And there was a comment in the Discord chat about what has happened to Allen. What is this strange little slump? And I think looking back on it, if you want to take the long term, the strange part, the anomaly, is going to be that I think it was the 2020 year he had when he was the near MVP and MVP candidate.
Yeah.
That's going to be the anomaly in Josh Allen's career. The rest of it is going to be this guy who can run for 50 yards at any point and throw the ball 60 yards downfield at any point, and also throw the ball straight to a defensive player at any point. I'm starting to think this is what we're going to settle down to. This is what Josh Allen is, and the kind of player he is.
We had the discussion a week ago. I was talking about the Bills and were the 2 interceptions that Josh Allen threw in a blowout like predictive? And then he did it again this week. He threw interceptions like they seem kind of predictive to me.
It's amazing. In just the second halves of these last 3 weeks, Josh Allen has put up negative 250 DYAR. That's not just the worst in the league. That's worse in the league by almost double anyone else. These late game interceptions are killing the Bills, because on a play-by-play basis in the second half against the Vikings, they weren't really that bad. They had a success rate of something like 49%. They were okay, but it was the 2 interceptions, one at the goal line, the other in overtime. It was the aborted snap in the end zone. It was that huge sack in the third quarter. I think it was that turned a 3rd and 1 into 4th and 14, which turned maybe a go-for-it situation into a punt. Like, if any of these things, it's not that they're doing bad on a play-by-play basis. It's these huge moments where Allen is doing something, it's not that the 4th down interception wasn't the most terrible decision in the world. I mean, it's 4th down, you're forcing it to make a play. It's unlucky that the Vikings got a huge run back off of that.
Right.
But you're talking a handful of plays where Allen is just, I am Josh Allen, I'm going to make a hero play. Like, the interception in overtime was crazy. The receiver wasn't open. They were in field goal range. A tie would have been really good for the Bills' odds. They did not need to do that. There was no need to try to squeeze the ball into that window. But Josh Allen, because Josh Allen is really good, and Josh Allen knows Josh Allen is really good, tried to make what it would have been a spectacular play. It was unnecessary. It was a bit of hero ball.
Patrick Seeley says in the discussion thread, and don't forget, you can, if you're listening to us live, you can talk on YouTube or Twitch and ask questions. And he says, maybe the new Bills offensive coordinator sucks. I don't think this is Ken Dorsey's fault. It's not Ken Dorsey's fault that Josh Allen didn't see a defender in overtime. Like, that play design was fine. In fact, I think Devin Singletary was completely open on the right side of the field for a first down. Like, that's not the offensive coordinator's fault.
I think you could make a bigger argument that there's a different relationship between Allen and Dorsey as there was between Allen and Dable a year ago, and that begins getting into the more, I guess, psychological aspects of playing quarterback, of knowing what you're doing on any given play. And it's possible Allen has taken on more of I'm going to do things now. I'm the focal point of this offense kind of thing. We're getting into psychoanalyzing Josh Allen at that point, and that gets difficult. So I think there might be something there with the change of voices in his ear and stuff like that. But no, it's not Ken Dorsey sucking. That's not what's going on here.
So I mean, here's the thing about what's going on over the last couple of games. I'm not that worried about the Bills going forward, because first half, second half splits do not tend to be predictive. I don't think that the Bills have suddenly forgotten how to play offensive football in the second half of game. The problem is that what is predictive is your total performance. And the fact that Allen is throwing these stupid interceptions, next time he might throw one of those stupid interceptions in the first quarter. Like nothing says it's going to be in the second half. If he's making bad decisions because he wants to play hero ball, then that's going to be a problem all game long, not just in the second half of games. That's what I would be concerned about. And it gets back to what we talked about a lot before the season, especially on my shows with Mike Tanier, which is people thought I was a little crazy before the season when I said I would rather have Herbert than Allen in the regular season because Herbert is much more consistent. And then in the playoffs, you want Allen because the highs are so high that you take the risk of the lows. And that's the thing is Allen is just he's a guy with just like a really wide range of possibilities.
Yeah, and you absolutely want that high end, and it's just a matter of managing the low end. And Bills have done a great job of that to this point in his career. I mean, but yeah, I agree that I think the last 3 games are a bit of an aberration. Like teams have bad games, they haven't. It just they haven't happened all in a row here. So now that if what's wrong with the Bills? What's wrong with the Bills? Well, they're still number 1 in DVOA. Like they are still a good football team. Yeah. They're having a bit of a rough stretch right now, and it's better to have that rough stretch in November than it is in January.
Yeah, Patrick here seems kind of upset that we're a little too putting a fork in the Bills and saying they're done. I don't think that's quite what we're saying, but these problems are persistent, and they're going to have to deal with it, and to make them back to bite them in a much more important game than
right.
this.
I mean, I still think the Bills are the best team in the league. They're not perfect.
They're not perfect. I'm double checking these AFC standings to make sure I get them right this time. But they are looking up at Miami in their division and Kansas City overall. And there's a bunch of 6-3 teams now. They're tied with the Jets of all teams, and they're tied with the Ravens. They're tied with the Titans. So there is a big cluster of teams up at the top of the AFC, and they're certainly among them. But it's going to be an exciting race down the stretch. But he's right in that we should certainly not write off anyone just yet, because I certainly in mid-November of 2021 would not have projected the Bengals to get to the Super Bowl. So there remains a lot of football to be played.
There is a cluster is the slogan of the 2022 season.
It is. It's a 32-team cluster, really. But one of those 32 teams is the Minnesota Vikings, who, of course, because they upset the Bills and because Washington upset Philadelphia on Monday night, suddenly the Vikings are tied for the best record in the league, in fact. And I'm double checking that one. I got it right this time.
Yep.
So that's good. So we're all still skeptical of them, I think. And, they've had a lot of luck in close games. Brian, tell me about their record in close games and how they've done when the game is on the line.
The Vikings are now 5-1 in games where they have trailed in the fourth quarter. They're 7-0 in one-score games overall. And the last time a team had at least 7 one-score wins without any losses was the 2009 Colts, who got all the way to the Super Bowl before they ended up losing. That's the end they lost to the Saints. But the Vikings are basically dodging bullets every week, and they are making fewer mistakes than their opponents in these close games. That's not
clear.
Yeah, that's not super predictive going forwards, but hey, it's working for right now. If you're letting your opponents beat themselves over and over again, and you're not beating yourself, you're going to win a lot of football games. Not usually this many football games, but they are not making the big mistakes at key moments.
DVOA hates them.
Yes,
they are.
It really does.
They are the first 8-1 team to ever be negative. So I think we have a graphic, which hopefully we're showing, with the the worst 8-1 teams by DVOA. And you see, you can't even really compare the Vikings to the other teams on this list because they're all at least 10 percentage points higher than this year's Vikings. The 2014 Cardinals, where Carson Palmer got hurt and they sort of crashed out and lost in the playoffs. The 2012 Falcons are on this list. The 82 Raiders and the 82 Redskins, who did, go on a run in the playoffs and won the Super Bowl. But the 82 Redskins and Raiders are so much better than this year's Vikings and DVOA. There's like no comparison here. So it's like there's just never been a team that we've rated this badly with this good a record. If we looked at 7-2 and 8-1 teams, they'd be like the third or fourth worst. Like, it's really remarkable how much the ratings don't like them.
And it's weird because part of the narrative around the Vikings have been they've gotten better as the years gone along. They just added Hawkinson, Daniel Hunter has gotten there. That's not what DVOA says. They're actually at a negative 9.9% DVOA over the last 4 weeks, which is worse than they began. So, but according to DVOA, they're getting worse and they're still winning.
They have been outgained by their opponents by something like half a yard per play.
Yeah. I've seen sometimes a mediocre team gets on a run early and the confidence builds, and by the end of the year they turn into a good team. And like you say, that is not what's happening to the Vikings. They're actually starting to play worse than they were in September and October, but they're still winning.
So I did go through all our splits to look for, like, what are the Vikings doing well? Like, what can we, like, pat them on the back and say they're doing well? And of course, all these splits are available with FO Plus subscription in our database. Okay, they're 10th running the ball. Good. They're 9th in offense on third downs. So that's good.
That's good.
Their defense is 9th in adjusted sack rate and 7th in adjusted line yards. But they're not as good in run defense DVOA because they have problems with short yardage runs. They are 4th against deep passes. And they're top 10 in kick returns and punts. Everything else, the Vikings are mediocre or worse.
All those things do kind of paint, they paint the picture of a team that's not making, the back-breaking mistakes over and over again. They're converting the third downs. They are not getting themselves in bad field position after kicks and punts. They're preventing the deep ball to, the one play drive things. So they're doing the things they're doing well in are the things that could kill you in one play or 1 or 2 plays. They're making their opponents go long drives. They're making them go play after play after play in short yards. Mm-hmm. And just if you have to do more things to be successful, there's a higher odds you're going to screw one of them up.
Yep.
So I mean, there is, you can see what DVOA is showing what they're doing well and how they're winning. It's just that shouldn't be. There should be other things there, and it's more the Vikings are just limiting possible mistakes.
Yeah, when we put this together, they're getting good field position. They're running the ball to give them makeable third downs. They're converting those third downs, and the defense. When you look at they're high in both adjusted sack rate and adjusted line yards. So they're making opponents get into long yardage situations. The sack rate means they can give up some yards, but then set a team back in scoring range, so prevent some touchdowns, turn some field goals into punts. And like you say, we're good against deep passes and make opponents work and wait for opponents to make a mistake and beat themselves. And in 2022, that's a viable strategy. It doesn't seem like all this is going to be sustainable in the long term. Eventually, they're going to have a bad day on third downs, or they're not going to be so consistent running the ball. But they're living on the edge and making it work.
But they go 4-3 the rest of the way. That's a 13-win team. I mean, this is. We're going to be talking about them in the playoffs. They're going to be one of the top seeds in the NFC. I don't think they're going to be the top seed, but
it's going to, they're going to end up playing looks like the Cowboys or the Giants in the first round of the playoffs in Minnesota, which is going to be a very interesting kind of game.
Yes.
But yeah, they're rope-a-doping their way to, at the moment, tied for the number 1 seed. Behind
they're playing the Giants this week in what could definitely be a playoff preview.
Yeah.
An exciting matchup of maybe the 2 biggest overachievers. Given where we thought they would be coming into the year. Well, the Giants are for sure. I think we were high on Minnesota. But anyway, these are not the only teams in football, as it turns out. There's 30 more.
Sorry, they're playing Dallas this week. I don't know why I thought they were playing the Giants this week. Sorry, they're playing Dallas this week in what could also be a playoff preview.
Yeah.
Still, yes.
Sorry, I knew it was an NFC East team. So.
We're gonna let's talk about an AFC East team and the Dolphins. The Dolphins won again, and Tua Tagovailoa is playing very well, even when Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle aren't carrying the team. Brian, talk to me a little bit about this Miami win over the Cleveland Browns.
So the Dolphins destroyed the Browns 39-17, and I don't think the game was as close as that score would indicate. So they jumped from 12th to 7th in DVOA and took over first place in the AFC East because the Bills lost as well. Tua Tagovailoa is leading the league in basically everything. He's leading in DYIR. He's leading in DVOA. He's still slightly above 1984 Dan Marino in DVOA. And the really interesting thing is that he did it this week without a Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle having a crazy good game. They combined for 110 receiving yards. Jarrett Classen has been on Twitter all morning talking about how this was Tua's best game in his career so far. Plenty of highlights, plenty of things, plenty of going through his reads, going through his progressions, making the right plays time after time after time. This, I don't think any of us believes Tua is as good as our numbers give him, as our numbers claim he is. But the way he was playing on Sunday was astonishing. He now thrown for 3 touchdowns in each of his last 3 games. The only other Dolphins quarterback to do that was Dan Marino, so he's keeping good franchise company at the very least. And while he's getting a boost from the Shanahan style offense and obviously having those great receivers, he's making play. You don't put up a 50% DVOA over 10 weeks without throwing the ball pretty decently. And yes, he doesn't have the strongest arm. Some of his deep shots are still fluttering a little bit, but they're not asking him to do that. They're asking him to run a very specific offense, and he's doing it at amazing levels.
Yeah, he's been fantastic, and I still would hesitate to vote for him for MVP over Mahomes, but he's probably number 2 at this point.
I think I was just going to say,
every week he keeps this up, increases the increases the how much you have to, because there's only so much you can say. Well, it's a small sample size. Always got to be receivers. If he keeps this up, at some point he's got to be, he's got to be in that argument.
And you can't, for the time being, you can't use the argument that they're not leading the division now, because for a while that was people were saying, well, now they're in first place in the AFC East. He did miss that. I think it was 2 games he missed, and that'll count against him in the voting. So yeah, I do think Mahomes is still the favorite, but like Aaron says, if something happens to Mahomes, Tagovailoa is the guy who jumps in the first place there. I don't think
Patrick Seeley, by the way, is right. The Browns' defense sucks.
Oh, it sure does.
So it's weird. They've got some good players. Like, how can a defense with Denzel Ward and Myles Garrett? I mean, I realize Ward's been out a couple weeks, and I think he played this week, though. Owusu Koromora's been out, and they have no defensive tackles to speak of whatsoever, so you can run on them easily. But, like, the Browns' defense is kind of horrible.
It's pretty bad. So the Dolphins here are now going to go into their bye week. Then they get another horrible defense, the Houston Texans. And then things pick up with the 49ers against the Chargers, not a tough defense, and then the Bills. So some interesting games coming up down the stretch here. But yeah, we had Tagovailoa number 2 at quarterback in quick reads this week. We had both Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert among the top 5 running backs. So it was a solid throttling of the Cleveland Browns by the Dolphins there overall.
Talking guts and stomps, that's the kind of game we want to see from a team that has a chance to win the Super Bowl.
This was a stomp, man. This was.
Yeah.
This is a stomp.
Yeah. You take a bad team and you make them look even worse than they actually are.
And if the season ended today, all 4 AFC East teams would make the playoffs. Although the Jets and Patriots in particular, their schedules get a lot harder the rest of the way. So I don't think that's going to happen. Right now, 16% of our simulations have all 4 AFC East teams making the playoffs. And I'll point out 13% of our simulations have all 4 NFC East teams making the playoffs.
Yeah, we don't have any numbers on it because it happened late last night, but that Commanders win over the Eagles shakes everything up.
Yeah. I mean, makes them 5-5. So I mean, the DVOA does not like the NFC East as much as it likes the AFC East, but they have more wins.
Yeah, the wins and losses. All 4 teams are 500 or better.
88% of sims right now, at least 3 NFC East teams make it. Like the Giants and Cowboys just have really good records, and the Eagles just have really good records, and it's going to be really hard to kick them out of playoff spots.
And there's not a strong middle class in the NFC. There's
right in the AFC. There's more of a strong middle class to kick the Jets and Patriots out of playoff spots.
Right. It's looks like it's the Giants, Cowboys, 49ers with the Packers and Commanders now trying to sneak their way in, and that for the time being, still a lot of football left to play, but that looks like the way it is. So let's talk about the Packers now, because the Packers also had a notable win to keep themselves alive in this playoff race.
Yeah, that's a big question. Last week when we looked over the playoff picture, we said, that the Commanders were the bottom line and everyone below them really had not much of a chance. And then the Packers come out and get I guess the question is, was it a season-saving win or not? Because after losing 5 in a row, they came back to beat the Cowboys in overtime and have jumped it back into the top half of DVOA.
And Aaron Rodgers passed well, right? Which is the biggest
Yeah.
thing has been Aaron Rodgers passing has not been good this year. And he had a very good passing game in this game. And that's what makes me think, yeah, maybe we're going to see a little bit of movement from the Packers in the second half. You know, they might not be dead yet.
Yeah, Packers fans have been waiting all year for one of these young receivers to step up and to get that chemistry with Rodgers. And Christian Watson finally did it with over 100 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns. He's the first Packers rookie to do that since James Lofton in 1978. It's been a long time since they've had a young receiver actually have a game like this.
Yeah, Aaron Rodgers this week, the best passer of the week on throws to wide receivers, which is great news for Green Bay because it's what they've been struggling with all year with their offense. So if they can do that, and they still have Aaron Rodgers. If he can still play like even a shadow of Aaron Rodgers to get some plays in these guys downfield, it changes their entire team.
I would be more comfortable with the Packers if they had beaten the Cowboys convincingly. But the fourth quarter comeback was incredible. Before Sunday, the Cowboys were 195-0 all time when leading by 14 points after 3 quarters. They had never lost in their entire franchise history, and Aaron Rodgers pulled that off on them on Sunday. That's
stunning.
Yeah, I mean,
the Cowboys have played a lot of football games. They've been around for half a century.
Yes.
No, 60 years. So
yeah, they've been very good for most of that time. Therein lies the issue. Tom Landry's teams weren't blowing very many fourth quarter leads.
No, nor were Jimmy Johnson's.
Yeah, Mike McCarthy knows a thing or two about blowing fourth quarter leads, and I am sure that the Packers fans are mixed feelings about showing Mike McCarthy a bad time in his return to Green Bay. I'm sure that Packers fans were torn about that. And especially Packers quarterbacks. I'm sure they had mixed feelings about beating their old coach.
We mentioned here the Packers are not dead yet at 4-6. They're still hanging around the perimeter of this playoff race, trying to make some kind of desperate run. These next 3 games: Tennessee at home, at Philadelphia, at Chicago, and then their bye. So we'll see. Are we liking their chances of being a relevant team late into December or even January? God, the regular season goes January 8th. Forgot about that.
Relevant maybe, but I do think it's too little too late. I think after 5 straight losses, including losses to the Giants and the Commanders, who are going to be the kind of teams they need to beat in if there's a tiebreaker situation, I think they've given themselves too big of a hole to dig out of.
Yeah, if they beat the Titans, there's no tiebreaker goodness off of that.
Right. Yeah, I mean that is the least useful win you could possibly have. I think they're going to be in the race down the hunt, but I think they've given themselves too much to overcome.
Yeah, they still play the Titans, the Eagles, the Dolphins, and the Vikings. That's a pretty tough slate there.
Yep.
With 7 games to go. When you're already up against the wall, you have no margin for error.
Yeah, Patrick Seeley points out if Seattle collapses, well, if someone collapses, then the Packers could take advantage of that. But they really need 2 teams to collapse.
Yeah, one of the 2 teams to collapse.
One of the 2 NFC West teams, and one of the 2 NFC West teams, and one of the 4 NFC East teams need to collapse. And if that happens, the Packers are right there with a chance to make that run. But they need significant help.
Well, one of those teams that another team they play is the Chicago Bears, who I have now put Justin Fields on my must-watch category. If he is playing and I can put him on, he's gonna be one of the teams on my Sunday ticket screen. I can watch 4 games at once there, and he's up there with Patrick Mahomes in the must-watch division because he's gonna do something very, very exciting. I can't tell you which team it's going to help, but on any given play, he could do something that you must see one way or another.
Yes, he's been great the last few weeks, and exciting. More than great, he's been super watchable.
Yes. Watchable. That's the word for it.
And calling the Bears watchable is something that has not happened in quite some time.
Yeah. There's no 2-yard checkdowns on 3rd and 10 going on here. There's 60-yard runs and long bombs downfield and brain dead pick sixes and and who knows. But But a lot of this is what he's doing on the ground. Brian, tell me a little bit about the rushing ability of Justin Fields.
Fields is challenging for the quarterback single-season rushing record. He's currently second all-time through 10 games behind Lamar Jackson in his 2019 MVP season. Over the last 5 games, Fields has run for 555 yards, and that shatters the record in the Super Bowl era. Lamar Jackson had 473 yards in his best 5-game period. Fields is almost 100 full yards ahead of that. In this game, he was the 4th player in NFL history to have a 50-yard passing touchdown and a 50-yard rushing touchdown in the same game, joining Jackson, Cam Newton, and Ace Parker.
Oh, yes, Ace Parker.
We need another Ace Parker right away. That's a tremendous name.
This is the side I love the most, and this is one I'm going to keep watching. The Bears have rushed for 200 yards in 5 straight games. That hasn't happened since the passing rules changed. The last team to do that was the 1976 Pittsburgh Steelers. The record is 7 games in a row, which was set by the 1972 Pittsburgh Steelers. And with Fields running the way he is, you don't put it past them to be able to challenge those kind of pre-passing era records. They have every chance to pull that one off. At the very least, they've been the best rushing team, since 1978, which is basically the modern era when you talk about offensive football. At the same time, the Bears are now the first team in NFL history to score at least 29 points in 3 consecutive games and lose all 3 of them. So all this rushing is not helping their win-loss record. And Fields,
which is very strange.
And
because most times when teams rack up huge rushing numbers is because they're killing second half leads, and that's not what the Bears are doing at all.
Fields still has a negative 9% passing DVOA over the last 4 weeks. So, I mean, there was some morning show talk like, is Fields in the MVP conversation? No, he's still below average passing.
Dan Orlovsky. No disrespect to Dan Orlovsky, but come on.
He is 22nd among qualified quarterbacks over the past 4 weeks in passing DVOA, which, I mean, that's still a lot better than he was at the beginning of the year. He was at negative 50% over the first 6 weeks. And if Fields
was unwatchable early in the year, he has now become a watchable passer and an electric runner.
Yeah. He did have a negative passing DVOA this week, but that's only because of the interception, which is a little bit of something. Other than that, how was the play, Mrs. Lincoln? But yeah, only because of the one horrible play that caused the Bears to lose was he bad. Take that one out. If Fields can stay at like just an average passer, then his rushing ability makes him an incredible weapon to have. He doesn't have to be Patrick Mahomes. Doesn't have to be Tua Tagovailoa.
No, he just has to be an average passing quarterback.
And he's approaching it. This is what you want to see out of quarterback in year 2, right? You want to see improvement as time goes on. I don't know why it took the Bears so long to figure out, hey, maybe we should take advantage of Fields' mobility. And it's not like they're running like the Lamar Jackson offense. A lot of these plays are, rollout scramble kind of things that where Fields has the ability to take off. Like he has now permission to take off to a certain extent. But it's not like they're designing the entire offense around Fields running. They're just giving him the green light, and he's shredding people because of it.
I didn't break down this week's game. Last week's game when he almost set the rushing yard record. I'm now forgetting who was playing in that game. Was it Miami?
Yes.
Every time he had a designed run against Miami, he picked up a first down. Every single time. And the scrambles were the big plays. There were a couple of failed scrambles in there, but when they just said, Justin, go get a first down, he said, okay, and he got the job done. So there's a lot to talk about with the Bears. We were talking about the Bears like a month ago about what would happen if they got a top 5 pick. Would they go for a quarterback to replace Justin Fields? And I think, first of all, they're probably not going to get a top 5 pick, but I think we can take the Bears out of the quarterback market when we're looking at the 2023 draft at least.
Yep. He's definitely broken out the last few weeks, and at this point, the Bears would be looking for tools for him to improve.
Yep. This is why, whenever you hear which rookie quarterback's on the best, which second quarterback, you have to give these players a little bit of time to develop. You can't really make a final judgment on a quarterback until a first round pick until they're in late second, early third season. You got to give them time to actually develop, because We got a little bit of flack this week for saying that Fields is more exciting than say Zach Wilson or something, even though Wilson has the significantly better passing stats at this point in time. It's like because we can see what happens when Fields does well. We see the developmental aspects of him. We can see this is what the core of his game will be. This is what he does well, and if he can improve those other things, this is who he become. You have to give quarterbacks time to develop into who they can be. Like we could have written Josh Allen after one season, and look where he is now.
But you can't bring up Josh Allen as a sample because otherwise you would hold on to every horrible quarterback. Every horrible quarterback would be like, yes, but what about Josh Allen? And then you would hold on to a lot of horrible quarterbacks who would never develop.
At the same time, Allen did take a big step between year 1 and year 2, which is what we've seen from Fields in the last 2 weeks. That's the underlying point. You have to give someone at least a time to make that improvement.
Well, the Indianapolis Colts also improved in what I thought was one of the biggest surprises of the week. Jeff Saturday, the coach who is not a coach, maybe he is a coach. The Colts come in and they beat the Raiders in Las Vegas.
If he's the one who talked Irsay into putting okaying Matt Ryan going back into the lineup, then he's a coach. Because the biggest difference with the Colts was not Jeff Saturday. The biggest difference with the Colts was Matt Ryan. He may be toasty, but he doesn't suck like Sam Erlinger. That was the biggest difference.
Talk a little bit about Jeff Saturday's debut here, Brian.
Okay. The Colts have not had great luck with debuting coaches recently. He's only the second of the past 8 Colts coaches, which goes back into the Baltimore era, I believe, to win their debut game. He joins Jim Caldwell. I mean, Tony Dungy lost his first game. Frank Reich lost his first game. Everyone else did. And all I could think of when I saw, Jeff Saturday celebrating, there's a picture that was very, very big in 49er circles after Jim Tom Sula's interim game at the end of the 2017 season, where they put up a list of the best win percentages in Niners history. And you had Bill Walsh, and you had George Seifert, and at 1-0, you had Jim Tom Sula, and here's the future. And then everything else happened after that. But actually, I think a better comparison for Saturday might be Mike Singletary, even if I'm just talking about bad 49ers coaches, because Singletary came in the middle of a pretty terrible 2008 49ers season, and the Niners had a winning record the rest of the year because they had just checked out on Mike Nolan. Mike Nolan was not doing anything. Singletary was able to rally the troops around like personality and gumption and playing hard to the whistle and stuff like that. And they gave a short dead cat kind of bounce. Like they got better reaction to a little bit until the next year when Singletary actually had to design a team and stuff like that. So that might be what's happening here a little bit. Saturday came in and gives that shot of adrenaline to a Colts team that was floundering under, that if the locker room had checked out on Frank Reich a little bit and Saturday comes in and says, no, we can actually do this. Let's go and charge. And if that kind of, bit of like emotional boost helped them up to this win, that might be what we're seeing here. Yeah. Or we might be saying the Raiders are just a terrible football team.
The Raiders are a wreck.
They are.
The Raiders are a wreck.
0-6 in one-score games this season. So they're a wreck that's also having bad luck.
Yeah.
And their defense has been terrible. And their offense is without Darren Waller or Hunter Renfrow.
Patrick Seeley in the chat points out that that emotional boost happened to the Raiders last year because this was a playoff team last year. After they fired Gruden, they went on a run, and they've been a playoff team this year. Janice comes in, and all of a sudden they're bottom feeders. It's bizarre. And this week we get the privilege of watching Josh McDaniel and the Raiders take on Nathaniel Hackett and the Broncos in a battle of 2 incredibly underperforming teams. Can we make this a loser leaves town match? Can we get some better coaches in here, please?
You mentioned Matt Ryan being in at quarterback here, and I think the defining play of this game for both teams actually was 37-year-old Matt Ryan scrambling for a 39-yard gain. It was the longest run of his career by nearly double. He had a 20-yard run way back in 2010 at the spry young age of 25. Here he is. We all thought he was on the verge of retirement, and he's breaking off the longest run of his career. How does this happen? Well, Mike Tenier broke it down and walked through. And when you don't watch Ryan, just watch the Raiders in coverage. And there's like 3 or 4 guys who have just checked out on that play. And they're not paying attention to him. They're trying to find a receiver to cover. One of the guys who is chasing him appears to be jogging after Matt Ryan and not really caring. Someone's got a chance to make a tackle. They just kind of sidestep him, let him cut back inside. They let Matt Ryan juke them back inside and go for more yardage. It is a horrible play by the Raiders defense. They look completely disinterested. They look completely not trying. And the response from Raiders ownership is to verify that Josh McDaniels will still be the coach for 2023. Yeah.
I mean,
it would be a lot better for the Raiders and the Patriots if McDaniels just went back to the Patriots.
Yeah, actually, it would. That hurt both teams, yes. And
I am generally against firing a coach after 1 year, but this is not the first time we've seen McDaniels struggle as a head coach.
That being said, I will say McDaniels in Denver was a good head coach. McDaniels in Denver was a horrible personnel guy.
Yeah.
That's what happened in Denver was his just terrible personnel moves, like drafting Richard Quinn in the second round and drafting Alfonso Smith and then trading him for a 7th round pick. And I mean, just ridiculously bad personnel moves. Wins and losses wise, he was reasonable.
And that quarterback out of Florida he drafted, that didn't work out too well.
That did not.
So yeah, in any perfect world, Josh McDaniels versus Nathaniel Hackett would be loser leaves town, and then in a perfect world, they would tie and they'd both be gone. But I don't think we're gonna get that lucky. One player who is having a good year, one team that is having a good year, Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. At least they're in first place, and at least they won this week. Tom Brady, he's really high in quick reads every week, and he's really high in the overall DVOA rankings. And people ask how, and the answer is ball security. You got to know here on the interception you can get to, but there was a point in this game where everyone's seen it. Leonard Fournette threw a pass to Brady, which was a horrible play and was easily intercepted. At that point in time, Leonard Fournette and Tom Brady had thrown the same number of interceptions this season. 1. They'd each thrown 1. And then things, Brady went ahead in that mark later in the game.
Yeah, Brady had thrown 399 consecutive passes this season without throwing an interception until he finally threw one in the second half.
Yeah,
the all-time record. Yeah, the all-time record is only 402. He was 3 passes away from yet another all-time record. So I guess start again. Let's see if we can catch up with the rest of the season.
And I like the stat that Brady is the first player to win a game in 4 countries.
Yeah. USA, United Kingdom, Mexico, and Germany. But he never won one in Canada. He never got to beat the Bills in Canada. So that's the one country he's missing from his resume.
Wouldn't it be great if they brought back NFL Europe and he could play in Scotland and
he would at the age of 55. He just keep going.
Well, his former backup, Jimmy Garoppolo, is having all he does is win games.
Garoppolo is now 10-2 in all time in games where he does not throw a touchdown pass. That's the best win percentage for any quarterback in such games since 1950. It's incredible. I went back because I saw that the NBC flashed up that stat, and that can't be right. And that's right if you're looking at win percentage, which is crazy. But then I started looking, well, who else is up there? And I found all the quarterbacks to be at least 5 games over 500 in games where they don't throw a touchdown. And here's the top 5. It's Otto Graham, arguably the best quarterback of all time. Tom Brady, arguably the best quarterback of all time. Peyton Manning, arguably the best quarterback of all time. Roger Staubach, arguably the best quarterback of at least the 1970s. And Jimmy Garoppolo. This is one of these things is not like the other.
And Pat Hayden.
Yeah, the rest of the group is Pat Hayden, Lamar Jackson.
David Woodley.
Yeah, Dave Woodley and Don Heinrich. So you get more Garoppolo-like players as you get down. Right now, Garoppolo's up there with some very rarefied air.
I recognize Don Heinrich's name, but I've forgotten who he played for.
Heinrich. Man.
Oh, Brian, come on now. It's an obscure football player in the past.
I had stuff for Ace Parker, not Don Heinrich. Heinrich was for the Giants. Yeah, that's right. He was the Giants in the 50s. So he was working with Vince Lombardi's offense at that point in time. And so obviously there was the proto Packers sweep, stuff like that. Those 50s Giants teams had Lombardi as offensive coordinator and Tom Landry as defensive coordinator. So the head coach, Jim Lee Howe, kind of just had to sit there and read the newspaper while everything else was going on because the 1960s are being developed on his offense.
Don Heinrich went to high school in Bremerton, Washington, and played for the Washington Huskies. So there you go.
Yeah, that's why that's why you're
a local boy for you.
That's probably why I recognize his name more than anything he did in the NFL, honestly.
10-2 without throwing a touchdown, which is crazy. Like, it's not crazy when Lamar Jackson's up there because most of the games where he doesn't throw a touchdown, he's running for a touchdown, so he's providing value with his legs. Garoppolo just, he's running the offense as is being required, I suppose is the best way to phrase that. And he's doing it very well.
And Elijah Mitchell had more carries than Christian
McCaffrey, they split with yards, but yeah,
just
Mitchell
kill McCaffrey fantasy owners.
Yes. Yep. Well, at least McCaffrey got the touchdown. That gives them something.
Look at the catching value, you would think, but yeah, and Shanahan said after the game they're going to keep splitting time. He made all this major investment in Christian McCaffrey, and it's still going to put him in a committee. Just they keep making weird decisions over there in San Francisco, and it keeps working.
Yep. Yeah. The other 49ers stat we have is that the Bosas are now the 7th family with at least 100 sacks.
Yeah.
Although we're missing one of them from our list here.
That's the strange thing. I was going to mention that before we went on the air. The stats that what the NFL's put out is that they're the 7th family, but the NFL hasn't listed the families. So I had to dig up and try to find out, who they were, and I found 5 other groups. I found the Watts, I found Clay and Chase Matthews, Howie and Chris Long. I think Howie Long is doing most of the heavy lifting there. John and Irvin Randall, and Arthur and Chandler Jones. I cannot find the 6th family. So if a reader wants to go out there and find the other family that had backed up 100 sacks, where each player has at least 1 sack. It's not like the Bruce Smith family did it because he did it by himself. You had to have at least multiple players with at least 1 sack. I could not find. I looked for a couple hours and I could not figure out who the 7th family was. So if you can figure out the people who are up there with the Bosas and the Watts and the Matthewses, I would love to know.
Yeah, it's the Matthews family. When people talk about great NFL families, it's always the Mannings and Watts that come up first. And the Matthews clan, by sheer numbers, there's been like 9 of them over 3 generations now. And some of them here have been legit superstars. And that's not even counting Bruce. So the Matthews done very well here.
Right, the offensive lineman part of the family, right?
Yes.
Yeah, long time.
Different stat we'll have to develop for them somehow. But the 49ers are doing very well. The Bosas are doing very well. And as we talked about earlier, Patrick Mahomes is also doing very well.
Yeah, just because I feel like we need a weekly Patrick Mahomes is really good stat. Here's your weekly Patrick Mahomes is really good stat. He has thrown for 4. He threw for 4 touchdowns this week. He has now thrown for 4 more touchdowns in 22% of his career games, which is the highest percentage in league history by a mile and a half. In second place, it's Aaron Rodgers at 14.9%. There are not enough superlatives to describe how good Mahomes is. We talked about how great Tua is and how he's has like the 5th highest DVOA in NFL history. And it's like, yeah, but Patrick Mahomes still exists.
He does this every year. He's fantastic every year. So
and there was a time where you could say, well, Dan Marino was never as good again as he was in 1984, and that's probably true. He was still great for the next decade and a half. But you kind of keep waiting. Maybe this is just a 1 or 2 year fluke for Mahomes. And if I'm doing my math right, this is his 5th year as a starter, and he's been Patrick Mahomes every year. I don't think that's going to change anytime soon.
They've reached the AFC Championship in the last 4 seasons, and you wouldn't count against them doing it again this year. I mean, it's become that every year now. It seems like it's being, well, who is going to challenge Patrick Mahomes to be the top quarterback in the NFL? Is it going to be Josh Allen? Is it Tua? Like, it's going to be, well, it's Patrick Mahomes and whoever the flavor of the year is to a certain extent, because Mahomes is just going to be there. Looks like for the rest of his career, and we are privileged to be able to watch him every week. He's amazing. Yeah.
That's a good way to put it. Is a privilege. And before we just wrap this up, I'll drop this one last Chiefs note we have, which is in their win over Jacksonville. They committed 0 penalties And when you have Patrick Mahomes,
first team this year to have 0 penalties in a game. Yep.
when you have Patrick Mahomes and you don't beat yourself, you're going to win a lot of football games, and that's why they're the best team in the AFC right now. And so that is going to do it for this week. Before we go, I do want to once again mention our friends at Underdog Fantasy, because you, the Football Outsiders listener, you can play on Underdog Fantasy with us and double your first deposit up to $100 with promo code OUTSIDERS. If your season-long fantasy teams are floundering, you can play Underdog's Battle Royale, a fast 6-round weekly fantasy football draft with easier chances to win than traditional daily fantasy sports sites. You can even win $50,000 if you grab first place. Or try their pick'em games, where you can easily pick players' chances to go higher or lower than their projected stat lines, even in states where traditional prop betting currently isn't available. Underdog is the fastest growing fantasy site around. Join the fun right now, over at underdogfantasy.com, or download Underdog in the App Store and use promo code OUTSIDERS now to double your first deposit up to $100. That is going to do it for this week. I want to thank everyone for listening. I want to thank Aaron Schatz. I want to thank Bryan Knowles for joining us. That was a lot of fun, guys. Let's do it again next week.
Sounds good.
All right.